This is a story about American Jews and imagery that surrounded them in 1935. Traditionally, because of the Second Commandment's prohibition against graven images, Judaism has had a conflicted relationship with imagery. In the biblical period, the Israelites were commanded to destroy objects created by their neighbors. Later, when Jews found themselves living surrounded by Greek and Roman imagery, the rabbis took a more accommodationist stance, teaching that only that which is treated as a god or worshipped is prohibited. That which is not treated as a god is permitted. Throughout Jewish history, most commentators agreed. And so the issue became not the quality or content of any particular object, but the stance an individual spectator took toward it. The underlying fear was that non-Jewish objects would draw Jews away from Judaism. But this story is about Jewish images, 20th century images, mass-produced images that were qualitatively and quantitatively different from all images that came before. In the 19th century, astounded by the power of cheap and reproducible photographs to convey detailed images of faraway places like the Colosseum or Pantheon, Oliver Wendell Holmes predicted euphorically that we would soon enter an age where form would be divorced from matter. Matter in large masses must always be fixed and dear, he wrote. Form is cheap and transportable. Decades later, Walter Benjamin less euphorically theorized somewhat differently, that mechanically reproduced imagery, while far more accessible to the general public than earlier forms of art, lacked any quality of authenticity. According to Benjamin, it had lost the aura an original work, say a handmade inscription or drawing or scroll, might have once had. Benjamin celebrated the accessibility of mass-produced imagery, yet he cautioned against their manipulation. Living in Europe in the 1930s, Benjamin was most worried about the politicization of aesthetics to fascist ends. But in America, it was national manufacturers who by the 1930s had been employing fields like psychology and linguistics for decades to determine how to predict and control human behavior, and more particularly, how to manipulate imagery and symbolism to create a mass homogenized consumer base. The Fortis production system and scientific management now enabled corporations to manufacture huge quantities of product. But now for them to be profitable, across America and regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, or gender, they also had to manufacture desire.
The following is transcribed.
Nickel, nickel, roo-de-da-da-da. Nickel, nickel, roo-de-da-da-da. Pepsi-Cola hits the spot. 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel, too. Pepsi-Cola is the drink for you. Nickel, 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 nickel.
By the 1930s, the media was playing a central role in fueling mass consumption as radio, magazines, and newspapers became vehicles for the national advertising campaigns of large manufacturing companies. Large corporations employed advertising agencies to develop a range of tactics to persuade consumers to buy their products. Often in the guise of information intended to be educational or instructional, these mail-order shopping guides, product testing services, pseudo-informative pamphlets, and other promotional devices promise consumers success and fulfillment. And that's where Joe Jacobs enters the story. A pioneer of target advertising, Jacobs, who initially in the teens sold ads for the Forward and other Yiddish newspapers in New York City, recognized that national manufacturers' ad campaigns were not necessarily reaching the Jewish market, at least not the hundreds of thousands of Eastern European immigrants living in New York who spoke and read Yiddish. So to help national manufacturers advertise specifically to the Jewish community, in 1919 he created his own firm, which he called the Jewish Market. Working out of his office on the Lower East Side, Jacobs offered two services to companies interested in advertising in the Yiddish press. He could translate their existing English advertisements into Yiddish, preserving the images and text used elsewhere in national advertising campaigns, or he could function as a full-service creative ad agency, not just providing translation, but also designing imagery and text that would communicate messages persuasively to the Jewish readership. Because his company was for many years the exclusive one offering these services, it had an extraordinary impact on the appearance of advertising in the Yiddish press. Beginning in the 1920s, Jacobs worked closely with many of the largest manufacturers that were selling mass-produced food products across the country. He had a accounts with General Foods, Maxwell House Coffee, Beechnut, Ralston, Camel, Domino's, Jack Frost, Fairy Soap, Swiss Night Cheese, Gold Dust, Hellman's Mayonnaise, Crisco, Planters Hi-Hat, Borden's, and many others. Perhaps one reason these companies sought his services was that during the 20s and 30s, most of the major advertising agencies in New York hired no Jews, and realistically could be of little help when it came to reaching the Jewish market. The only way a Jew could get into advertising, at least according to David Koch, current president of Joseph Jacobs Advertising, was by opening his own agency. Joe Jacobs did this, and by the 1930s, his was the firm to use to reach the New York Jewish market. Jacobs employed many different visual vehicles and strategies in the ads he created. Not only did he advertise in Yiddish, but he also used a great deal of symbolic Jewish imagery. The images referenced Jewish religious practice, connection to homeland, and Torah. The case put forward was paradoxical. Asserting that the use of new products and participation in mass consumer culture were the means through which homemakers could preserve traditional Jewish values, the advertisements employed unique facets of Jewish identity, language, culture, and religious symbolism for the purpose of cultivating amongst Jews a homogenized, Americanized taste and appetite. On one level, the religious symbols suggested the importance of preserving Jewish culture. They were probably intended to evoke a positive emotional reaction in the viewer. But they also appear to have tapped a variety of Jewish anxieties about the preservation of religion and culture, about Americanization, attaining and maintaining middle-class status, about health and child-rearing and family stability, and more. For readers struggling with these profound issues, the ads promised relief, not in religious experience or values, not in Jewish community, politics, art, literature, music, or history, but in the market economy and the purchase of name-brand products. They all shared a single focus goal: to persuade a Yiddish-reading audience, particularly housewives who tended to be the primary consumers, to buy the featured products. The advertisements touted brand names as high-quality, American, Jewish, healthy, and sometimes kosher. And despite the fact that these products were not intrinsically Jewish in any way, the advertisements suggested they had deep roots in Jewish culture.